Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Mexico's many natural gifts to the world, and it will be presented by our fabulous NatHab expedition leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa, thank you so much for being here with us today. And just looking at the picture you have up on the screen, it seems to me we've got a lot to be thankful for. Thank you for the gifts,
Yes.
Mexico.
Yes, indeed. Thank you,
Let's
Sunny.
dive
Thank you.
in. I want to
Thank
learn
you.
more. Let's get down to it.
I know. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Melissa Silva. I'm a marine biologist. I'm currently working with Natural Habitat Adventures, guiding the monarch butterfly trips. We are just about to start this December. And well, I'm always been passionate about nature and about Mexican nature and Mexican culture, history, everything. I'm very Mexican. Um, so I really enjoy learning on what the origin of things, the origin of products, or the origin in this case of crops in specific terms. So I hope you enjoy this webinar with the information I was able to gather. And let's start with the beginning. So well, when we are in our on our tables, or when we are sharing with friends and family or by ourselves, not always we think about like where this is coming from, other than the supermarkets or the tianguis here in Mexico, the street supermarket. But well, our in most of our places, in most of our homes, the table is like the reunion of the world. We can find places, items from different places from the world. Just think about the rice, for example. We just think about here the example, the tortilla chips. So they come from different areas, and we all have them here due to the well, the commerce and the evolution on this exchange of products in mankind. So when we think about the origin of these products, if we go very back to the very basic things, we can find something that is called centers of origin. This theory or hypothesis was given by Nikolai Vavilov, was a Russian botanist, and he identified eight, 6 to 8 different centers of origin around the world. And what he defined as a center of origin is the area, is a geographical area where a specific species or crop here, either domesticated or wild, develop the most distinctive characteristics or properties of the species. So, for example, if we think about coffee beans, for example, they developed the very first genetic characteristics was developed in the Fertile Crescent here in the Middle East, for example, or in Ethiopia, some others. So the center of origin nowadays it has changed the denomination on a center of diversification or domestication, and that is because with the movements of the humans, right here we can see the areas where some crops were developed. We will talk about agriculture more than cattle, for example, more than the domestication of animals, because the agriculture happened a little bit before than the domestication of animals. So that gives us more clues on how the human societies evolve and how the humans move around the world following the traces of the crops. So the green areas, as you can see, those are like the centers of origin for some species. But then we have the blue arrows that tell us where they move and where they have been found, let's say. So for many plants, for many crops specifically, the original origin or the primary center of origin differs from the center of domestication or from the center of diversification. So we will see 2 or 3 cases here in this webinar that products that we think are from Mexico actually evolved in a different place, but they diversified and they were domesticated in the central part of the Americas, in the Mesoamerica area. So what's the Mesoamerica area? Is this area in darker green, shaded in darker green, that comprises Mexico, like 60% of Mexico, which is the tropical areas mostly, whole Guatemala, Belize, part of El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and a little bit of Costa Rica even. So in this fertile area, in this very diverse area in terms of topography and geography, is where we have the center of either origin, domestication, or diversification of many plants. So far, there's an estimation of a little bit more than 100 different crops that come from this area that are now distributed and used worldwide. And these are some examples that we have from this area. We have the chayote, for example. I have an example of the chayote. It's actually a fruit related to the squash. The papaya, the guava. So from this, I will show you some that are more characteristic of the Mexican area of Mesoamerica. To start, of course, the chili, chili pepper. The oldest evidence of the domestication of the chili pepper is in the Tehuacan Valley, which is the central part of Mexico, nearby Puebla city, and that happened about 9,000 years ago. Another crop that we have from the area is the amaranth. This is something that is called a superfood. It has a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, and it's very easy to carry, very easy to prepare. From the same area, central part of Mexico, the oldest register is from about 7,000 years ago. The chia seed is also another superfood. Is the seed from salvia plant, Salvia hispanicus. Salvia hispanica. So that species grows in the mountain areas of Mesoamerica, from Mexico all the way down to Guatemala, actually. And the oldest registers in the area of use in this area of Mesoamerica date back from almost 4,000 years ago. Vanilla, that is super popular, very well known all around the world, was first cultivated in the area of Veracruz, the Gulf of Mexico, by the Totonac culture, more or less 3,000 years ago. And actually, they started the farming of the wild vanilla, and later on they developed the cultivation of that, the agriculture of the vanilla. This is one of the crops that needs a webinar on its own, well, each one of those, but this one specifically, because the process on how the vanilla has been modified by the humans, so it relies on the humans for pollination, is something very interesting to know. And well, of course, the avocado, very, very popular worldwide, and on the Super Bowl, of course. The oldest remains, or the oldest avocado traces that we have back from 8,000 years ago, more or less, in a cave in the Tehuacan Valley as well. They found a piece of a stem from an avocado plant that was consumed by humans. So another webinar of its own on each one of these. And then Turkey is also a very popular item on our tables for people on the US. Thanksgiving wouldn't be the same without the turkey. In Mexico, Christmas Eve, actually, is very traditional to eat turkey. We call it guajolote. It would be the modification in Spanish for the Aztec name Huacholot, that means a big monster, actually. And this was domesticated from a turkey-like bird named Meleagris ocellata from the Yucatan Peninsula. And the oldest remains of these date back to more or less 3,000 years ago on the Yucatan Peninsula. And here on the central part of Mexico, with the Mexicas, with the Aztec Empire, there are registers of more or less 2,000 from 2,000 to 1,500 years ago. So it was something very popular, that it actually permeated to all the social classes. It was not something that was specific to the upper class or to the lower class of the Aztecs, of the Mexicas. So well, we will discuss in this in another time. And if you remember what I mentioned about the center of origin that can be different from the center of domestication or diversification, we have the case here with the tomatoes and the beans. So the center of origin, the genetic center of evolution for these two crops is South America, the northern area of the Andes. But well, from there they move to Mesoamerica, and in Mesoamerica they develop the characteristics that now we have worldwide. They were diverse. There were more species, subspecies, varieties, and they existed as an actual crop in this area in Mesoamerica. And speaking about a crop that has not Mesoamerican origin, but diversification and distribution to the world, is the cacao, or well, better known sometimes as the chocolate seed. So there's a very recent study, is the most recent one in 2018, 16-18, and in this study, you can see here the name of it, the title, Use and Domestication of Theobroma Cacao and the Upper Amazon. What happened here is that a lot of botanists, after the center of origin that this Russian Vavilov gave, they started studying a little bit deeper on each one of the species, on each one of the centers, and specifically in the cacao species, they noticed that there were more species and subspecies and varieties on the upper Amazon, on the upper Andean area here on South America. So this gradient of colors that we see on the map, the darker color is the number of species, a higher number of species, from 9 to 11. Then the reddish colors goes from 6 to 8, 4 to 6, 4 to 5, and then the yellowish colors is from 1 to 2 species. So if we notice the upper area of the map, Mesoamerican area, we have basically one species, Theobroma cacao, and that's the one that was given to the world, that was spread out to the world by the Spaniards. So with this investigation, with this research, all the botanists made in the upper Amazon, they discover a high variety in the genomics and the phenotypic, that means the physical characteristics of the cacao in this area. But nevertheless, in that specific area, there was not such a complex use for the cacao during the pre-Hispanic times. So in this area, for example, the cacao, they presented more like an acid sweet pulp, and they were semi-domesticated. They didn't develop an actual crop from the various species of cacao they had. And in the other hand, in the central part of the Americas, in the Mesoamerican area, both Mayans and Aztecs, they developed the agriculture of cacao, and they had a very complex cosmology or cosmovision around the cacao. So this was the plant that the gods wanted for their offerings and so on. So it was a currency, actually. It was used as a currency in the central part of Mexico for the Aztecs. Here, for example, on this image on the right side of the slide, we see a codex, and you see the tributes that some people from the Gulf of Mexico was paying to the Aztecs. So you see the skins from jaguars, you see birds, you see other plants and things, and then on the center of that you can see a a, a bag filled with cacao seed, with the Teobroma cacao species that was given to the chiefs here on to the Tlatoanis on the Central Valley of Mexico. So besides being a tribute for the chiefs, it was a drink exclusively for the upper class, exclusively for warriors, for priests, for the chiefs, for the Tlatoanis, emperors. It was used in ceremonies. It was used as offerings for their gods, but it was also used, the beans, the cacao bean was used as a way of currency. So, for example, you were able to buy with 100 beans, cacao beans, one male turkey. But you can buy a female turkey with only 80 cacao beans. You were able to buy a rabbit with medium-sized rabbit with 50 beans of cocoa, of cacao tree, and so it was used as a coin, as a currency for the day today. So it was very important for their religious processes, for the civil processes. Here on this image on the right side of the slide, you can see the representation of a royal wedding. So on the left side, this one that I'm pointing out with the laser, this is the man. He's one, two, three, four, five, six, 8 dear senior, like lord, eight dear lord. So you can see 8, the number 8 right here, the deer right here, and this is the lord. And then he's marrying, this is 13 snake lady from, I don't know, she has the name here of the place where she's coming from, but well, it's a royal wedding, and the lady here on the right is offering the chocolate, the beverage prepared to the husband. So they are basically like blessing the wedding with the drink of the gods in this moment. And actually the name, the Aztec name or the Nahuatl name for chocolate is chocoat, and that means literally bitter water, because the preparation used to be very bitter, and they added a little bit of chili powder, a little bit of agave honey, but basically it was just water, hot water, chocolate beans, the cacao beans, and a mix in natural. So it was very, very bitter. And then for the Mayans on the left side of the slide, we can see the representation in a vase that is called now the Princeton vase from the classic period of the Mayans. We can see the representation of this lady here pouring the chocolate from a vessel very high from her high to another vase on the bottom to make more foam. So actually it was disrespectful to serve a chocolate without the foam. But remember that we didn't have, back on those days, we didn't have like dairy products. So you had to make the foam from the natural fats, from the natural oils of the chocolate. And that's the way they used to do it, like pouring that from a very high area to the vase down there, and then doing the same once and over and over. And something that I find important to know about the chocolate and the cacao and the cocoa is what the difference between the cacao and the cocoa. Basically, it's the same word with different vowels. So the cocoa is the word in English for cacao. So basically, it's a modification of this native word, cacao. And the cacao refers basically to the plant, to the beans, to the unroasted product. And once you have the presentation nowadays for the sale to the public, for sale to the public, it's like the vegan chocolate product or the raw or the product that is almost pure natural product. In the other hand, when you have the cocoa name or label, is basically the cocoa processed with added ingredients, either milk or sugar or preservatives or other things. So basically that's like a very simple way to put one against the other and see the difference. But well, in any case, both are delicious. And as anything, if you eat them with moderation, there should be no problem at all. So another species that is has the center of origin, the diversification and domestication in Mexico is the pumpkins. The squash pumpkins, I think I heard ground or something like that, another name in English that I haven't heard before. They all started their domestication about 10,000, 9,000 years ago in an area of Oaxaca, on the upper lands of Oaxaca, Mexico, in the southern part of Mexico. And here they found these are the actual images from what they found in that cave. A piece of stem of a pumpkin, and the other part, not the stem, but the little part from the bottom of the squash, and one seed. So with the genetic studies and this and that, they determined that that was one of the very first areas where the pumpkins were domesticated. So nowadays, from that species, Cucurbita pepo, we have a wide variety of squash, of calabazas, we say in Spanish. And nowadays, we can say that there are between 15 and 19 accepted species, but there are more than 100 varieties of squash. So these are the species that are, let's say recognized by the science. But well, there are, from each one of these, you can have 4 or 5 subspecies or varieties. And something that I found very interesting is that back in the States, you can tell you can say winter squash or summer squash. There is not like a real difference except the time where you harvest them, winter or summer. And usually during the summertime, these kind of crops, they are not fully mature. They are more like immature fruits that are harvested. And the winter squash would be like the fully mature fruit of the squash plant. For the Mesoamerican people, the squash was something very, very important because you can use everything from the plant. Like every part of the plant was able to be used for humans. So you can eat the flesh, you can eat the seeds, you can eat flowers, you can eat even the sprouts. And still nowadays we can have a lot of products coming from the squash plants. You can see the seeds here. You can see, I was surprised about this image on the upper right. So it is half of a squash filled with, I think it's the squash pulp and ground beef, I don't know. And it was put in the stove, in the oven. And you use the squash as the vessel for the container for the dish. So that I found that very interesting and that I was not very aware of. And of course, very popular, the jack-o'-lantern. In Mexico, it's very popular to eat the zucchini flowers, the squash blossoms in quesadillas or soups. So, well, it's a plant that has many, it has a high importance because of the many uses. But besides that, it's also part of a system, an agricultural system named milpa. Here in Mexico, we call it as milpa. Back on the States, is known as the Three Sisters system. And basically is the association of maize, of corn, beans, and squash. There can be other crops added to this, but this is like the basic one. And it has been the backbone of the Mesoamerican agriculture, and is still used nowadays. Here in the southern part of the states, in central part of in the northern part of Central America. So this deserves a webinar on its own because it's so complex, so important that maybe we can speak about that later. So well, of course, maize is something very well known for Mexico. We call ourselves los hijos del maíz, the sons or the child of the corn, of the maize. So the domestication of maize started somewhere between 7,000, 6,000 years ago, and the oldest remains that have been found were here in the Tehuacan Valley in central part of Mexico, and once again in Oaxaca, with a little bit of 1,000 years of difference, but in general terms, they are very close to each other. So the domestication started here. And it started with a plant that we still have in a wild form. It's called teosinte. Is the wild ancestor from all the domesticated maize that we have nowadays. Is this plant here, very, very simple grass form. And from that one, the evolution, the selection, it was artificial selection by the ancient Mesoamericans. We have a transition maize until the current diversification. So actually, nowadays in the world, there are about 200 varieties of corn. And when I say varieties, I mean the color, shape, size, number of grains, disposition of the grain, uses that we can give to those. We can use some specifically for human consumption, others for cattle consumption, for the popcorns. So in Mexico specifically, we have some native corns, native maize varieties that are not given anywhere else in the world. This is a sample of those, and some of them can be found in very specific geographical areas. For example, in the Mixteca Sierra on Oaxaca, like in certain hills, you will find a very specific crop of this native maize, or in the north of Mexico, also a very specific one. So it makes us, besides being the center of domestication, of origin of maize, also we are the center of diversification. We have the highest rate of mazes in the world, varieties of mazes. And of course, it was the most important crop for ancient cultures in Mesoamerica in general terms. And here you can see the representation on the right side of the slide of Centeotl, the god of the corn. And on the head, you can see a hat with two corns on different colors, as you can notice. So it's the god of the crop of the corn itself, the maize, the milpa. So everything around the maize in Mesoamerican times. We have other representations here. I just love this representation of a keeper, a milpa keeper. It's just like right there next to the milpa, but just taking a nap for a moment. And of course, this is part of the cosmovision for both Mayans and Aztec, which are like the most prominent cultures in Mesoamerica area. On the Mayan legend of the men of maize, it is said that the three primordial gods were thinking like, oh, we need humans, so they worship us, and they created humans from mud. But well, mud is just soft, and at the moment that human tried to move, they were dissolved. And then they created humans from wood, from sticks, so they were able to move, but they didn't have like feelings, or they were not softer enough to worship the gods. And later on they mix the corn with water, blah blah, they made this dough, and they created men from maize, and they were just like the perfect type of men for worship the gods. Then on the legend of maize from the Aztecs, a Mexica legend, it is said that when the Aztecs arrived to central Mexico, they were eating just like roots and animals that like insects or lizards. Like they were not very developed in terms of society and agriculture. So Quetzalcoatl transformed into an ant and went in a sacred hill that was in the Valley of Mexico, took one grain of the crops that was over there, that was a grain of maize, and give it to the Aztecs, to the Mexicas, for them to cultivate and develop the agriculture of the corn. So well, as you can see, it's one of the crops that has a variety of uses. There are a lot of products that we can have from it. Artificial flavorings, fructose. There's a list here of some corn derivatives. And in Mexico, for example, we can use the maize, the corn, in more than 600 recipes that has the corn as a base, not just the tortilla that you can take with every meal, but the actual base of the recipe. Another one that is native from this area, the center of origin is in Mexico, is the poinsettia, believe it or not. It has the center of origin in the northern area of Guerrero state. So if you see, we are moving a little bit northern in the country. And it was actually considered a weed in ancient times, in pre-Hispanic times, but it was appreciated because of the flower, because of the color of the flower. It represented like the fire, the blood, so it represented life, but death at the same time. You remember the Mesoamerican cultures had a lot of duality in the cosmology they had. So basically anything had a duality. Either the gods were male and female at the same time. The representation of the flowers, they represented, for example, this life and death. So for the Mexicas, for the Aztecs, this was a very important flower in terms of decoration and cosmology. So they're very, despite it's now such a very well-known product for Mexico, there is very little history that you can actually trace back to the Mesoamerican times, the pre-Hispanic times. Here, this is just a couple of things that I found after a lot of hours of research. The Codex 20 Mazorcas, 20 mazes, 20 corns. It speaks about the fight that these two families, Hispanic Spaniard families, had in 1600s, mid 1600s, early 1600s, and they were fighting over some lands on this western coast of Mexico, central and western coast of Mexico. So these families were saying that my lands are from these towns and these other towns up to this town and this other. So each one of these little persons, little people here you can see, is the representation of a town with the toponymic, with the name of the town on the head of that person, of that people. So if you see carefully here, this toponymic is actually a poinsettia. It's actually a flower representing the people that was living on this area of Mexico. So that's in general terms, that's a very recent location for the poinsettia. And then in the 1800s, we have also from another manuscript of the flora a representation of this plant. They were checking the uses, the medicinal uses for the plants in the New Spain in Mexico, and they put this plant in the manuscript, but they didn't have actually like a real source of what it was used for. So in other scripts, it was told that it was used, in a moment I will mention, for medicinal purposes, for dyeing textiles. So well, it has similar uses to other plants. One second. See, okay, it was on the other side. Ornamental uses, they were offerings for Huitzilopochtli because, as I mentioned, it was associated to life and death, to this blood. Huitzilopochtli is the god of war, and also is the god of reborn or renaissance. So there's the duality. But also it was used to reduce fever, to treat some skin diseases. So it has medicinal purposes. And macerate, the colorful leaves, was a textile dye. So as you can see, it has many uses that we're not able to get at first. But going back to how it ended in the world and how we ended naming it poinsettia, there was this man, Joel Roberts Poinsett, that was the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico. Right after our independence, he was sent to Mexico to be the ambassador to help the new country to establish. And in one of his travels, he was in this region of Guerrero, and he saw this flower and sent it to the States, to I think North Carolina, South Carolina, I don't remember which one of the Carolinas, but he sent it over there, and it just was like the most beautiful flower, and the commercialization started right there. In a native language, it's called Cuetlazochit, that means flower that withers. So basically, the Aztec emperors wanted to have that flower in their botanical gardens, because they actually have botanical gardens in this part of Mexico, central Mexico. Excuse me, from plants from all over the territory. And the problem with the poinsettia is that as soon as they take it to the central part of Mexico, it dried. It was withering. So that's why they name it Cuetlazochit. What we know as flowers or petals, earring coating, is actually a modified leaf that is called bract. So this modified leaf is surrounding the actual flowers that are all gathered in inflorescence called cyathias or cyathias. So those little things inside the middle of the red blooming, those are the flowers. And one trick that I just learned is that if you want your poinsettias to last a little bit longer during the season, find the ones that have either green or red flowers, but not the ones that have yellow flowers, because those are already ready for pollination. Those are mature, so they will last less in the season. Excuse me. So, well, I mentioned already the treatments. These are shrubs in the natural environment. They are shrubs that can be up to 15 feet tall. And there are many varieties. Actually, there are 25 recognized species of poinsettias, but from those, we can have like 150 different varieties of them. So these 4 pictures here, those are wild poinsettias. You can see this one on the right, upper right. It's very different from the ones that we can picture on when we say poinsettia, but they are according to the phenotypic characteristics. And well, of course, we have a wide variety of poinsettias now to choose from. And well, basically that would be it. I think we have some time for some questions, Sonny. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You just pull out some of the coolest things that I never knew.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Nice
Thank you for going the extra mile to bring us very interesting topics.
My pleasure.
We do have some great questions already, but I want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions via the questions field in the control panel. Do you know how poinsettias came to be associated with Christmas?
So they actually bloom in the wild. I will refer to the wild poinsettias in this moment. They bloom in winter time. We can find them in the hills. We can find them in abandoned land in this area of Mexico. They actually distribute from southern Sinaloa all the way down to Guatemala, which is actually the Pacific coast of Mexico, all the way to Guatemala. So they are associated to tropical dry forests, and those forests, they lose their leaves during winter time. So actually the poinsettia loses their leaves during winter time, and it is when they bloom, and that is during Christmas time, more or less. So the association comes from that specific thing, that they basically bloom in winter time. And the friars, the priests that were here in Mexico during the New Spain time, they used those flowers to decorate the churches and the cathedrals, because they think they symbolize like the blood of our Savior Christ and blah blah. So it was something associated also to the nativity itself. So basically that's why it is associated to that.
Let's see. Are all of these products able to grow in all parts of Mexico, or do they just grow in different parts?
Well, if they can grow in any part that has the weather the weather characteristics, the soil requirements, the like all the climate requirements of the crop can be grown anywhere else in the world. For example, a very simple but very notorious example is the vanilla. The vanilla is native or is originated, domesticated in Mexico, in this specific area of Veracruz, on the Gulf of Mexico. But nowadays, the #1 producer in the world is Madagascar, because they had the perfect climate, the perfect conditions of soil, of temperature, of humidity to develop the crop of vanilla. Which another one? Like tomatoes, for example. Tomatoes are cultivated worldwide, basically, because they can adapt to these characteristics that are in the world, but that are similar to the ones where they first developed, let's say. So in general terms, yes, they can grow anywhere in Mexico and the world, but that place must have the minimal characteristics for the crop to be the same crop and be able to grow.
Sure. Let's see. Were different products specific to different peoples of Mexico, different indigenous peoples? If so, What are the associations?
Yeah, I understand the question. Yes. Yeah, for example, once again, taking the poinsettia case, that it was difficult to associate it or to trace it back anywhere else in Mesoamerica. It was associated to the people on this area of Guerrero that I mentioned. The right here, these people on this part of northern Guerrero is what is now, I'm pretty sure you have heard of that, Tasco Guerrero, where the silver, very popular silver products is. So yeah, for example, the poinsettias associated to this, they were the Mixtecos, Mixtec culture. The cocoa, the chocolate, is associated more to the Mayans because this area on Tabasco, actually, all the peninsula, but mostly Tabasco area is where the cacao was grown. Like the crops were growing better than anywhere else. So well, we associate the Mayans with the chocolate, the Aztecs with the chocolate as well because they received that as a tribute. We associate, for example, Mm, the squash, the triada, this milpa agricultural system is also associated strongly to the northern areas of this one, the milpa, the northern areas of Mexico, right on the edge of Mesoamerica and what we call now Arido America, or the dry area of America. So because of the conditions of the soil and the crops, we can associate more or less to these cultures. So, but in general terms, it's like the whole area of Mesoamerica with these all products.
Okay. And what about agave for tequila? Is that native to Mexico?
Yes, actually, that's a species that is a group of species. The Agabaceae family is native to the central part of Mexico. Once again, we know that because we have diversity on species. We have number one on species of agave, and it is associated more to the westlands and central part, northern central part of Mexico. Although there are some areas in Chiapas and Oaxaca that also have a very high diversity of agaves. So yeah, the agave is a crop that is nowadays known worldwide, but it was originated in Mexico as well. Yes, the sisal agave, the Henneken, where the ropes were made from, is also native to this area of Yucatan as well. So yep, the agave was originated and domesticated in Mexico.
Hmm. Vessels in Chaco Canyon in Pueblo Bonita, which is in New Mexico, have traces of cacao in them, as well as chili. Does this suggest that bitter water was traded in prehistoric southern North America?
Yes, yes. So actually, there's a very complex exchange of products between what is Mesoamerica and the northern part of Mesoamerica, the arid America area. But yeah, all of those native cultures in the Chaco Canyon and around that area, where it's a very complex history on that relationship because the Aztecs, one of the theories or the hypotheses that is said is that the Aztecs came from that area of North America, southern North America. So, so the Aztecs is like a sister group of those people living back on the day in El Chaco Canyon, for example. So yeah, very likely all of these crops were taken north and south. So remember, the people was gatherers, recollectors. They were moving following the seasons following the migrations in the Americas. In prehistoric times, we used to have migrations also of big mammals. So they were migrating north and south, following the food, following the vegetables available. So in that case, people was moving up and down in this area, following them. So of course, they were taking these crops in the very beginning of domestication, north and south, up and down, and doing some exchange. Eventually, when they settle and when they develop the complex societies that now we relate as the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Toltecs, well, there were some divisions, let's say, and maybe some crops just stay in certain areas and they didn't come up farther north, for example, in terms of, I don't know, honey or whatever that was taken from the Yucatan Peninsula. But yeah, chile, cacao, squash, maize, chile, cacao, squash, maize, tomato, those are the ones I remember, were also found in the southern parts of the states, in those ancient towns in the Chaco Canyon and the Pueblo Bonito people and all those areas. So yeah.
Fascinating. Well, that's the last question we have time for today. So I will hand it back to you for closing comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this was a pleasure. I think we can have one webinar every week speaking about this, because it's so complex and so important and so interesting, all of this. But well, so far this is it. And the next time you are eating or you are getting something from any supermarket, just think a little bit, get curious on where this is coming from. So eventually all these natural resources are important to trace back to the origins, so we can protect them and we can just have them for many more generations. So that would be my closing comment.
Thank you again, Melissa. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Please join us again tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.